Waterworks building, then coastal headland. Afternoon. Hannah left in the early afternoon. She had something she needed to do. She didn't elaborate and I didn't press. Whatever the note contains, she's carrying it now, and I think she needed time away from the investigation to decide what comes next. I understand that. I stayed in the Waterworks building with the device and the packets and the photograph from Case 7 and tried to think. The device hasn't stopped. It's been holding its continuous signal for several hours now. Steady light, steady tone, no interval. I've been setting it on the table and picking it up again every so often to confirm the signal is unchanged. It is unchanged. Whatever state it moved into in the packet room, it has not resolved or returned to its previous behavior. I went back through my recorder notes. I went back through O'Connor's Project Chronos journal. I went back through the MO journal from the train station. I was looking for anything about the device's behavior that I might have recorded and not fully understood at the time. I found it in the MO journal. An entry from 1922, O'Connor writing about the device in the period after it arrived at 47 Marginal Road on its own. He'd been observing it, cataloging its responses. The entry covers 3 pages, most of it describing the interval behavior I've been tracking since Season 1. But at the bottom of the 3rd page, a separate paragraph. Smaller handwriting. The kind of compression that means he was fitting something in that he almost forgot to include. I'm reading it into the recorder now. The interval behavior describes proximity and significance. Those are the device's 2 primary registers. But there is a 3rd register I have only seen once, and I record it here because I do not know when or if I will see it again. When the device holds a direction without interval, not blinking, not cycling, but holding, it has found the primary grid. The interval ceases because distance is no longer the relevant measurement. The device has locked. The direction it faces when it holds is the bearing to the primary grid. Follow the bearing. I read that 3 times. Then I stood up, picked up the device, and held it in front of me. The continuous signal has a direction. I didn't notice this in the packet room because I wasn't looking for it. The signal was new and strange, and I was focused on documenting the behavior, not on whether the device was oriented towards something specific. But holding it now, turning slowly in place, I can feel the difference. The signal is not uniform. Held at one bearing, it is marginally stronger, not pulsing faster, not a discrete escalation, but a quality difference in the sustained tone, a density to it that changes as I rotate. I turned slowly until I found the maximum, northeast. I went outside and confirmed the bearing against landmarks. Northeast angled slightly toward the coast, the same quadrant as the pre-registry site on the headland, but not the same direction, further north, further toward the water. O'Connor's instruction, follow the bearing. Hannah wasn't back yet. I left a note in the packet room telling her where I'd gone and took the coastal path. I should document the 7R23F9T connection before I describe what I found, because O'Connor's journal entry makes it clear and I want the record to show the sequence. The sequence, 7R23F9T, has been in my possession since Season 1. I found it on a slip of paper in the typewriter room at 47 Marginal Road. The device interval changed near it. O'Connor's July 1923 journal entry recorded receiving the same sequence from his unknown correspondent at the train station, with the notation, resolves at the primary grid. I've been carrying that phrase for the entire investigation without understanding what the primary grid was. The phrase sat in my notes, resolves at the primary grid. No referent, no location, nothing to map it against. O'Connor's 1922 entry just gave me the referent. The primary grid is the bearing the device locks onto when it enters continuous signal mode. It is not a location on the network map. It is the reference point the entire map is oriented around. The thing the grid is a grid of. Everything else in the archive network is positioned relative to the primary grid. The nodes, the crescent marks, the southern node map with its dozens of intersecting points, all of it arranged in relation to something that wasn't on any map I could access. Until now, the accumulation site. What Hannah's note calls the accumulation site, the season's destination, the device is pointing to it. The sequence 7R23F9T resolves here. 2.5 seasons of open thread, closed by a compass bearing and an old journal entry I'd read a dozen times without seeing it. The coastal path follows the headland for about 1 kilometer before it reaches the northern edge. I walked it in under 20 minutes. The device signal held steady throughout, consistent direction, no interval, the same sustained tone. At the northern edge of the headland, the path ends where the land drops to the shoreline. The coast here is rocky, not the gradual sandy approach of the southern shore, but an abrupt edge, the headland simply stopping, and below it a shelf of exposed rock running out toward the water. The tide was out, significantly out, a low tide, the kind that exposes formations that are underwater for most of the day. The tidal shelf extended perhaps 40 meters from the base of the headland cliff before meeting the water. I stood at the edge and looked down. The device in my hand was at its strongest response since I'd found the bearing. The direction was downward now, the device pointing toward the shelf itself. I found a way down. A scramble rather than a path. The rock is rough and the footing required attention, but it was manageable. I reached the shelf in a few minutes and crossed toward the area the device was indicating. The markings begin about 15 meters from the cliff base. Not a single symbol, not a scattered few. A system, organized marks covering the exposed rock surface in a pattern that extends further than I could see clearly from my position. I walked the perimeter of what I could reach before the tide margin stopped me. 30 square meters, possibly more. Hundreds of individual marks, cut into the rock with an implement I couldn't identify. The incisions clean and deliberate and very old. Not as old as the rock itself, but old. The edges of the cuts have been weathered for a long time, long enough that estimating an age feels presumptuous. The marks are not crescent shapes, not parallel lines, not any symbol from the southern node grid map or the pre-registry catalog card or any archive material I have encountered. The vocabulary is entirely different. A different system, working from different principles, representing something I can't decode by reference to anything I already know. I documented as much as I could. Photographs, recorder description, approximate measurements. I could hear the tide behind me, which meant I was working against the clock. At the center of the marked area, a depression in the rock surface. Natural looking at first, a shallow bowl in the stone, palm-sized, roughly circular, but not natural. The surface of the depression is smooth in a specific way, worn smooth by contact, repeated contact over a very long period in the same motion. Someone has been placing a hand in this depression, or many people have, over a very long time, and the rock has recorded it the way the stone shelf in the pre-registry chamber recorded the object that rested there. The device was pointing directly at it. I was crouching to look at the depression when I heard the tide reach the edge of the shelf behind me. I had less time than I thought. I photographed the depression. I photographed the surrounding marks. I documented the bearing from the headland edge. Then I climbed back up. I stood at the top and looked back down at the shelf as the water began to move across it. Slowly at first, then faster, the tide covering the marks in the methodical way that water covers things it covers every day. Within minutes, the depression was submerged. Within 20 minutes, the shelf was gone. The device was still holding its continuous signal, still pointing down, still pointing at what was no longer visible.